if we could just sit at women's feet and sit at birth and get to know the normal patterns of labor and pregnancy and birth, we can do so much good. We will know when to ask for more help.
Holy Wild Birth is a podcast embracing the reclamation of giving birth rooted in God's original design, undisturbed.
Here, we share home birth stories highlighting God's presence as the great midwife, as well as conversations about all aspects of a holistic, spirit-led childbearing year, from the perspectives of myself, traditional midwife Lauren Hall, of Rooted in Eden Private Membership Association,
And me, holistic birthkeeper and photographer Brooke Collier of Sister Birth. Together, we are co-founders and facilitators of Hearthmother Journey, where we are raising up the next generation of holy wild birthkeepers.
To choose a holy wild birth journey is to consecrate all of your decisions unto the Lord and reclaim creation unadulterated by centuries of human attempts to control and improve upon what God has called good.
Please remember that birth is not a medical event, but a natural process, and we are not your care providers, so this should not be taken as medical advice.
Hello, hello.
No.
So we are back here in the studio, and I have a special guest with me. Her name is Alisha, and she happens to be a fabulous traditional midwife. So I don't know what term you use for the work you do. But you can feel free to correct me on what terminology you might use. But she's also an HJ grad and is out there doing some wonderful things. And we wanted to just have a fun conversation today. So I invited her over, and I'm excited to introduce you to the Holy Wild Birth audience. How are you doing?
I'm so glad to be here. So, some states I am a traditional midwife and some states I'm not. And I said this to in an interview the other day. I said, I'm incriminated in so many other ways. It's okay if it's out there one extra way. But I serve through a private ministry. We are birth cultivated ministries, do different family health and different educations, but primarily home births and postpartum care. And right now we're traveling. So we're in North Dakota, being a midwife in North Dakota. And then we'll go somewhere else and we'll adjust the title and adjust the needs.
Awesome. So what's your traveling schedule looking like right now? Like, are you pretty frequently moving around, or what's that look like?
When we had started offering the travel support, we said, let's just keep bouncing around as frequently as we can. And it just hasn't booked up that way, that's okay. So our home base is in California. So right now we were in Texas. We came to North Dakota. We're here for July, and then we'll go back to California for some bus repairs. We're in full-time RVers. And then from there, I have someone for October out of state. And then I'm consulting with a couple people in other states, but no one else is for sure. We were consulting with a twins family a couple weeks ago. And so it's balancing, like, what am I asking for donations for this care, for this support, and what's balanced within their community. Like, if their standard midwives are asking $2,500, I simply can't travel to you and do all this for $2,500. So we're doing a lot of bartering, a lot of conversation. So that twins family, we're talking like, okay, what can bartering look like? What else can we do? So lots of conversations.
Yeah, I remember that season well. It was a fun time traveling and doing birth work. It's a very different, it's a different way of doing it for sure. It was really, I loved that season, but it was also it brings its own special challenges too. Just as a sidebar, I would just encourage you that if you are traveling into someone's community, you can, request that be covered in those ways. Like, that's an offering of a service that they're looking elsewhere because they can't find it, and it's okay to charge outside of their region's, norm, because those people are not traveling and setting up home and, all of the things. So it's a special service. Anyhow, sidebar. Value your midwives, ladies.
We're having a good time with this.
All right. Well, I know we had chatted a little bit about just Um, Something that's kind of near and dear to both of our hearts is just obviously like there's a physiological birth, but I think sometimes physiological birth gets this kind of like, it's just the fad, or it's like, oh, we're just doing that to like be a hippie, or like, oh, it's just the natural way to do it, so
Yeah.
this is how we're going to do it. But like there's actually firm, like, to honor the design of birth isn't just for some like trophy or to be able to say I did it that way. It's actually because to honor the design creates safety, creates, generally a smoother journey, not always. And there are things that can come up on anyone's journey all the time, but like we live in a fallen world. But following the design and not meddling with something that we were never given license to meddle with is actually what creates that safety net, like that. And I say safety net because like, what is safe? What is life? Birth is as safe as life is. But yeah, I love to just look at the design. I think the more I've learned about God's design, the more confident I show up in a birth room, the more confident I show up walking with women, because I understand the design, So I don't know. What does that bring up for you?
It brings up that I'm just like you're really careful with your words. I noticed that you didn't say this, and I think I've even heard you say it during Hearthmother Journey, was that we don't trust birth. You'll hear that often of like, oh, trust birth, but I don't trust birth, because you're right. We do live in a fallen world, and there are pieces that come up in our lifestyles that hinder and that get in the way and can be these speed bumps in the road. But I do trust the Creator, and I do trust that His plan is greater than mine.
Yes.
And so my due diligence is knowing His creation, knowing His, as much as I can, knowing His blueprint of what He's given us.
Yes.
And from there, I find a lot of comfort, right? Because I can sit in the mystery of, I don't know everything. And there is so much I will never know, but I do know that I'm held. And my, around every corner, whatever happens, I trust that that was for my good and His glory, regardless of how difficult that step could be here on earth.
Amen. Amen. I love that.
With every consultation I do,
go ahead.
We've got this overlap. That's the back and forth that's maybe your listeners will hear. But in every consultation I do, I'm sure to bring up the topic of death, knowing that this is the reality, and it's a huge disservice to families to not talk about it, to just let it be swept under the rug and let us just sit with our heads in the sand. But really, partially because of my own foundation as a person, and then it being the foundation of how I serve families, I recognize and want to constantly hold in the forefront of my path, I'm not the one in control. I'm not the key holder of life and death.
Yes.
And I want to be really careful with my families of, even in this very first initial conversation, what is that relationship like for you? Do you want to not acknowledge that? Do you want to explore that? Are you open to having that conversation? And that alone dictates where we move forward and how we move forward together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm very similar in that, and I actually have a student, and she's like, I always know when we get to that part in a consult, and it's like you're purposely trying to run them away. And I'm like, not actually at all what I'm doing. But she's like, you just test those waters to see how much responsibility are they willing to take. And, like, truthfully, if we're talking about the design, like, we're mortal. That's part of the design. Death is part of the design just as much as life is. And that doesn't mean that we sit on our hands and are incompetent and we don't know how to guard life. By any means. But I also will never step into a place to be like, I am God and I can guarantee you a healthy mom, healthy baby. And I will tell them, like, anybody who does, you need to, like, ask some more questions, because anybody who is guaranteeing you, like, anybody's guaranteeing that they can give you a healthy baby is got some heart issues that they need to check. And because I don't even know if I'll be alive tomorrow, like, much less whether you and your baby will be, or how your birth is going to go, or if it will be smooth, or if it'll be, the obvious, most common, normal design is Like, the stats are definitely in our favor. The science is in our favor that
Right.
it will be a smooth birth. That is normal. It is rare that we are going to see complications, especially when we're in an honoring of the design. But also, somebody is in the non-rare, or somebody is the rare. Somebody's in that 1%. Somebody is going to experience that. And my job is not to prevent you from the experiences God has for you. My job is to walk with you through it and to guard life and bring all my expertise and all of my my learning and my experience and expertise in birth. But you're an expert on your body and your baby and your relationship with the Lord, and what He wants to transform in you may take us on a journey we didn't expect. And we can't make any promises. We don't know what tomorrow holds. So yeah, anyways, I do the exact same thing.
And how much more can this revolve around relationship when we're approaching it the way that you and I are? It's like, so I was in a consultation this morning, and her and I were talking about, she was wary of, with one of her subsequent pregnancies, she was wary of hiring a provider, someone to come sit with her because she was worried about the sabotage. And then here she is pregnant again, and she's wanting someone to walk alongside her. And I said, they don't have to go hand in hand, the sabotage and the relationship.
Right.
Because you're building this trust together. So if I'm, if at 36 weeks, we typically will sit down and we talk about, here are the things offered to you in labor. At this current standing point, how do you want to approach those? What plan do you want to make? The heart tones, for example, listening to baby during labor. And so we'll talk about, this is common. This is what some families do. This is kind of, this is what it tells us and doesn't tells us, like just the nitty gritty of what this is. So you can make a good decision. And then in labor, those plans are followed through until you tell me otherwise. And we're forming this equal trust relationship of, you also know my intentions, so that if something comes into my intuition via the Holy Spirit, if something comes to me and I'm saying, I really want to listen to baby, I have questions, that you trust that me sneaking in and ninja listening is for your best intention. It's not because I've got this quota, I've got this, I'm afraid of being audited. Right. It's not anything like that. It's this really appropriate hierarchy that I cannot care for you and your baby more than you and your partner do. You guys, if it ever comes to that point, I'm in the wrong. Honestly, you're in the wrong also, because that's not how it should be. But definitely I'm in the wrong to be asking for that, to be picking that up off the table. So it's this equal trust relationship between me and you and your partner and me. And it's, I couldn't imagine doing it any other way and then walking away and feeling so much less fulfilled. I feel so fulfilled right now with the relationships I'm building.
So, that's what midwifery is about relationship. It has to be about relationship. Yeah. It's literally in the word means with woman. Like, it's to be with her, not to push her, direct her, pull her, guide her even. It's to be with her and to be that wise counsel, but not to run the show, not to make the decisions for her, So yeah, absolutely. I'm with you on that for sure.
We were talking, being a pattern noticer earlier, thinking where do we want to go with this conversation? And part of this relationship is each of us being our own pattern noticer. Yeah. Her husband knows her patterns well. He knows how her eyes light up, and he knows how she talks and how she communicates in more ways than just words. And she knows the relationship between her body and her baby. And then we're holding this for each other, that you are the expert in your baby and your body. And there are times when you're the expert, there's a normal outside of pregnancy, your normal within pregnancy, and then there's a broader normal that is just pregnancy in general normal. And that third sphere is where I know normal. I know this broader kind of default normal, but you're the one that knows this really specific normal, especially if this isn't your first baby. And then, there's a greater circle that I say it flips out and it inverts itself. And then it's when it becomes a pathology. And then we have to take it to higher care and get more support. But being a pattern noticer, you see 1,000 normal newborn exams. You're going to know when one is off, right? Or you listen to heart tones so many times and the accelerations, the decels, and okay, that was something different. Regardless of even knowing, yeah, regardless of even knowing, well, this is the rate and this is the standard and this is the normal limits and this is the textbook, if we could just sit at women's feet and sit at birth and get to know the normal patterns of labor and pregnancy and birth, we can do so much good. We will know when to ask for more help.
Yes, yes. It's so good and so true. I think that there is so much value in empowering the mom and father to notice those patterns as well. Yes, I think we talk a lot about as the midwife or even the doula or any other birth attendant, noticing those patterns so that they can help make wise counsel. But man, when they know that they are the experts in their wife, I love talking to dads about that. This woman, that her inside and out, her body, assuming we have this, quality marriage and there's some unity going on and we're dealing with healthy clients, he knows her better than anyone. And he knows when something's off. And I've, taught them that to you watch those, especially when I was a doula and people were going into the hospital or if in a transfer situation, even I'm they're not going to listen to me necessarily. You have to know and be the voice, and you have to say there's something off. And I will never forget, there was this one story I had, talked to them about in a situation of a woman losing too much blood, right? We've got a postpartum hemorrhage happening, and they're looking in the medical system. They're looking at the textbooks. They're looking at the numbers of what's her, is it tachycardia? Is it blood pressure, hypertension, right? Is it hypotension? What's happening with her vitals, right? Does she have, I'm stepping out of the postpartum, hemorrhage examples, but they're looking at temperature and pulse and respiratory rate and blood pressure and all of the things to determine, is this person okay or not okay? And do we act? And then with that, how do we act? Where's our practice protocol? And I'm not knocking the fact that they need a practice protocol, because they're not getting to have that relationship with those women. They're not getting to see what she looks like. They don't recognize that this woman looks a little puffy in her face, or is that just her normal shape, right? They don't know her. But when you are looking at, she looks paler than she normally does. Her eyes look a little different than she normally is. She's not holding her posture the same way right now. There's these nuance that someone who has built a relationship with, especially someone who's been in deep relationship, like a marriage, they're going to notice those things before the vitals go crazy, before something is off. They're looking at her her eyes aren't right. Wait, are you okay? Just like when you look at your baby right before they get really sick and you're they're looking a little off, right? There's something in their eyes.
Yeah.
There's not, there's nothing wrong yet, but the next day they're sick, it's the same thing. There's these tiny intuitive, it's noticing the patterns. It's not even intuition. It's awareness of these individuals you're in relationship with. And the story, I'll circle back. I was telling them you're an expert in yourself. You're an expert in your wife. You're going to know before even vitals show up if something's off. You have to lean into that. Let us know. Tell us what's going on. And we knew this whole, there was this going through, is this fear or is it not? Because all three of us at one point or another felt like she needed to be in the hospital. And we were I don't know what's going on here. But it was always one. None of us were ever in unity, but there would always be two of us that were planning the home birth and helping that. And then there'd be one going, I don't know, something's off. And so we'd show up and we'd have that conversation. And then that person would be settled. And then somebody else would be I don't know, maybe she does need to be in the hospital. And we kept doing that throughout the entire pregnancy. And we just kept praying over it. And okay, Lord, where are we at? What's going on? What are you saying? And then she went into labor at 36 weeks. And I was we've all had uneasiness at some point or another. I just really want you to just go in. Let's just, maybe in another situation we would have stayed home, but I think we've had enough, there's something off. Let's go in. So she went in and they were literally doing an ultrasound, and she had a placental abruption during the ultrasound. They watched the placenta come off and she lost so much blood, just insane. I think her final count was 2,400 cc's of blood. I mean, and it was just all instantaneous. They were, they see the placental abruption. They start running her to the OR. She actually gives birth on the gurney in the hallway, going to her body just ejected the
Whoa.
baby, but she was in the hospital where she needed to be because of
Yeah.
those unctions. But they hooked her up. So baby was having some issues, and mom, obviously, and mom is having some issues, obviously, and they hooked up the IV. They did not start the PIP. And the mom looks at her husband and is like, watch me, because she remembered me telling her, you have to, you're going to know first. And she felt herself going, and they thought that she was on the meds that she needed at the time, but she wasn't. She was just hooked up with nothing coming in at all. Nobody had started the flow. And so she grabs her husband and she said, watch me. And then she starts to go under, but they were so focused on the baby, nobody noticed her. And her husband was like, hey, there's a problem. And so they turn and they see that she did not have the flow going, she was not hooked. She was hooked up, but she wasn't getting any IV. And then all of a sudden they're taking care of her again when they thought that she was fine. And it was all because it was like, that doesn't look right. Like, she looks pale. She doesn't look okay. And nobody's watching her but him, because there was it was just insane. They weren't in the delivery room. They weren't in, they were in the hallway of the hospital, and they didn't know how to pivot. And so there was things getting dropped. And because of that, because of her husband being taught to be a pattern noticer, it's, very much saved her. There was complications that could have been worse. So I always remember that I have to, and that was obviously an extreme situation, but we can see those patterns even before it's an extreme situation, even before it's like, this baby needs to be on that mama's chest. And this, she just looks like she's not looking well, and baby is getting passed around by the siblings. It's time for mama to get back settled into the design of baby on mama, because something's not feeling right. And it's those little things that I truly believe, honoring the design and really knowing our women and knowing how physiology works, we're able to really protect it.
There was a labor I was at, and she didn't have any ultrasounds, and we didn't know where her placenta was. And she's just doing her thing. She's just laboring. And then we slowly start to see more blood coming from her. And at first it was like, okay, maybe this is like cervical dilation, could be. That's right. One of the normal things you can see. And then she starts to keep going, and she's losing more blood. And we're thinking, what in the world? We did the palpation, we did heart tones, we're checking vitals, trying to piece this together, knowing not currently this is an emergency, but this is something we're watching because we know normal. Right. We know
this isn't. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We know this, and not even that you have to know this measurement of 2 tablespoons is normal for a cervix or whatever. Not even that you know that, but it's like, that's off. That's more than normal. Yeah. And you can just, you know that because you've seen so much of it. And so this is why apprenticeship is huge. You have to see these things. You just can't know this from a book. And so she continues laboring, continues losing blood, and we're thinking maybe placenta previa to some extent, where it's covering the cervix. We don't know how much, and there were no vaginal exams done. And then there's just this unease goes throughout the room. And we were being really careful not to be panicked or putting out panic, just like, here's where we're at. This is what we're noticing. And in this, we're wondering, what does it look like in an hour? What does it look like in 2 hours? What does this look like postpartum and for a baby? Because when you're noticing these patterns, especially when it's something that's out of pattern, you're asking not just right now, what's happening? What's the problem? What's the deal? But how does this progress? What else is going to be in our hands? Especially if you're serving somewhere that's hours from a hospital, or you don't have access to like a medevac kind of a thing. She then, we're having the discussion, and labor comes with a certain intensity, and some women equate that to pain, some don't, but there's this level of intensity that you just know to expect from an outside external perspective. And then there's a level of, whoa, that's not okay. And she starts yelling, ow, yelling at sharp, yelling. And I'm thinking, get out. This does not need to be home. We should not be home. And so we continue the conversations, and very hurriedly, now things are progressing, escalating. and they end up transferring, and it was not a placenta previa. It was a fundal placenta up at the top, which was very shocking to us based on what we were seeing. But then we were, as labor continued and as we finished piecing things together, the baby was at basically a +2 station for 12 plus hours. And so we're thinking this is also against pattern. This is not a normal pattern. There should be descent and progress. And there wasn't. But then you had these other patterns of, well, that's normal. Heart tones, those are normal. The way this first time mom is going through birth, this is normal. However, you have these out of normals. And so it's always this juggling. And it ended in a cesarean, and I didn't get to see the placenta or the cord, but I'm assuming, if there was nothing else that was blatantly in your face, here's what was happening, I think it was a short cord that was causing just this slow abruption.
Yeah. Sounds like
we won't ever know.
Sounds like a partial abruption for sure.
But we knew to seek higher help because normal.
Yeah. Yeah. Such a great story. And I think being a pattern noticer is such good language too, because on the flip side, I always talk about we can't measure mystery, right? You can't measure the mystery, and we try to bring in our numbers and we try to measure things and, the timing of the contractions and the rhythm of a heart and the blood pressure. And we, how long has it been? And all of these things. And we start bringing in how open is the cervix? And we start measuring things that are immeasurable, really, when we start talking about the cervix. What even is it? Is it actually 10 centimeters? We don't actually know that. We start with our measurements to where we're measuring things that are not even measurable. And yet there are these patterns, and it reminds me so much of nature, we look outside, and it's not that you look at a growing plant and are okay, I need to count how many leaves there are and see how tall it is, and it's measured, will it produce fruit? I don't know. Let me look and see how tall it is and count its leaves and all of those things. We know that it needs leaves to get its sunlight to be able to grow. And, we know it needs deep roots, but nobody's undigging the plant to measure out its roots to see if the roots are long enough to be able to see if it's going to produce fruit. That would be ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
If you're measuring its roots and you're unrooting it to do that. And I feel there's so much of this. You can, though, look at that plant, and you can look at the color of the quality of the leaves. You can see the patterns of how it's growing towards the sun, and that it must need more sun because it's gleaning, off out of the normal pattern of just going straight up. It's leaning towards the sun. Oh, okay, it probably needs more sun, right? Or you can see the holes in the leaves, and you can see, spots, and maybe needs more soil, whatever. We can begin to look at the patterns instead of measuring. Not that measuring is bad, but it's also such a boxed in view. It's such a constraint, such a boxed in masculine view of the most feminine thing that you can do. So, there's value in the masculinity. We need masculinity in this world and in this life, and even in birth. You couldn't be able to have that baby if it wasn't for the masculine aspects. And so it's never and always, it's always wrong to, but it's part of the pattern, and it should be puzzle pieces of looking at the rhythm, looking at the pattern, not a restriction of this must be this, she has to dilate 1 centimeter every hour. No, but you do notice a pattern of progress, and you do notice a pattern of when things are not on that same path of normal. And maybe it's not necessarily quote unquote progress, but you do see a difference of, okay, mom is in a rest place, and it's a rest and be thankful, but we're still moving towards the right. Or no, labor has completely stopped, and now it's time to trust the body and what it's doing. Mom's tired and it's giving her rest, right? Those kinds of pattern noticing versus, I don't know, this progress measurement.
Yeah. Well, and also just to ask the stupid questions maybe, but where would we be, an entertaining idea, where would we be? Because midwifery knowledge, part of midwifery knowledge is this passed down generational wisdom. Yes. And then it was folded in with obstetrical science. which is that very masculine measurements, textbook, seeing what we can see from the outside, not basing off of the women's internal feelings and rhythms. But where would we be if we didn't have that folding in of the masculine? Like if that just never came in, if we totally kept, maybe if we kept them separate, or if it just didn't exist. I don't know. It's a stupid question because it doesn't exist. But I just wonder, because we've got so much of our current mainstream midwifery education is based off of this obstetric science of the numbers, of the statistics. And we've come so far away from the acceptance of you can't measure mystery. There is a very intentional mystery. If we were meant to know all the happenings of the inside, well, we'd have window bellies. There would be so many other things that just wouldn't be what we have today. So there's this very intentional mystery, and
he calls it
the really, really sweet. Yes. The really sweet thing is having the humility to sit in that mystery, to be okay with the mystery. And I feel like I'm a nerd. I love to continually be learning. I've taken I think I'm in my third midwifery type birth course. And I just love it. I love to continually be learning. And there's always going to be things you're learning, but it's because my drive is I want to know the blueprint of what the creator's given. I want to know physiology so that I can say, okay, well, we're being given these puzzle pieces, things that maybe are pattern or not, or maybe they're pattern for a different puzzle. Like these are puzzle pieces that make a preeclampsia picture, but maybe we don't want them to be a part of your grand picture. And so knowing how can we restore physiology? How can we restore balance to the body? And that comes in so many ways. That comes in relationships, in herbs, homeopathy, simple foods that you're eating, the right relationship with your husband, with your God, with your self-image and yourself, who you are. It's this constant, like a constant strive to look wider for me. Because then I'm able to look really small at the details and know, okay, here we're going to go next.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that it's, I always talk about the fact that the more we know, the more we know nothing.
We don't know.
Exactly. The more we, it's like we step into an understanding of like, oh, this is a mystery. This is bigger than me. This is his ways are higher than ours. And he told us that, but I didn't understand. But now I really get it. His ways are higher than ours. And yet I also, and to back up a little bit, I almost push back on that the obstetric model brought the science in, because truly, if you look at history, it didn't. The women did have more of, we had our case studies, we had our pattern noticing, you stepped into the midwife mind, and they were doing legit science as science should be done. Okay, what's the variable? What's changed? What was that? Like, what just happened? How did we, here's my hypothesis. Let's keep observing and keep recording and observing and recording and observing and noticing how we've affected things. And there was a true scientific method happening with the women in the women healers. And you insert Rockefeller, insert power, greed, control. And you start going down the history of the obstetric model and the heinous things that were happening, both for, again, power, greed, control, racism, all of this stuff. And you see actually a complete degradation of the science that we had, and a loss of that wisdom for, just whatever was the fad of the day. Like you had these regular doctors bringing in leeches to bloodlet, you had these ridiculous things that they weren't doing science. They were just doing whatever, I really believe that we'll finally get to people 100 years from now will look at cord cutting like we look at bloodletting with leeches. We'll be like, what were you doing? Like, why are you taking their blood? Because it makes no sense. And yet we had that some of the best ways to learn is look at the old midwifery texts. If you can find them and get there's such wisdom there that was not just a woo-woo, I felt this and I intuited that. There's a place for that. I am probably one of the most intuitive spiritual midwives that you'll meet. And yet I'm also very scientific. I am a research nerd. I want to know the evidence. I want to know, and they can be married together. That masculine and feminine mind can be married together because it's meant for marriage, right? But that's a whole other bunny trail.
Well, and it's good when we have them rightly ordered, right? It's good to have the science and the masculine, but we're not being driven by routine. We're not being driven by, well, this is your number, this equals this, and this is what we're going to do next, without being able to consider and weave in the feminine of it.
Yeah. It reminds me, I've seen this pastor years ago, and every time this conversation comes up for me, I think about it. And I wish that this was not a podcast so I could just pull it up and show everyone. But essentially, it's this image that says chaos and order. So there's like a picture and a line down the side, and one says chaos and the other says order. Chaos is this stick it's like a picture like a bar graph. So you have a stick standing straight up, very organic stick, but it's standing straight up on its little end, standing as if it could be a tower. And then the pine needles next to the stick, that's all stacked one on top of the other, just like in this nice little ordered pile of pine needles, and then another little order of pine needles, and another little, and it's like a little bar graph and it's ordered. It's been stacked. It's been measured. We know how many pine needles there are. And then there's, like that's chaos. Like that says that's chaos. And then order was the pine tree, and how it grew. And there's this trunk, and there's the tree, and there's the pine, branches, and all the pine needles are where they're supposed to be. And that is order. That's God's order. The organic growth of that in everything in its place versus man's, what we've tried to say is order is actually the chaos of, let me put the stick with the sticks and the pine needles with the pine needles and separate and measure and stack. And it's like, that is not order. It is so orderly that it's not order at all.
What a great image that is.
It completely removes the design. And it's my favorite image to talk to people of like, yes, we need to be good stewards. Yes, we need to measure what we can measure, but then we need to stop at when we start to try and disassemble the design so that we can measure it more. That's when we've gone off the rails. Like, it goes back to like, don't be digging up the roots so you can see if the roots are growing well. Like, look at the pattern of the fact that it's growing well.
But you can disassemble to understand it better for its growth.
Right. So it's such a, like there's a place and a time, and then, but it has to be, the pattern of the whole, and then microscopic looking in at the individual pieces so we can understand it further, but not disassembling completely his design and saying, okay, I'm going to rip it to shreds so that I can understand it and measure it and stack it and hold it. And, like there's a balance, and we have to go, what am I supposed to understand, and where do I lay down my understanding of the peace of the Lord and recognize that his ways are higher than ours? And that's the balance that I think that we as birth workers have to, especially as hearth mothers, as handmaidens of the Lord, that we have to walk with competency and humility. And competency and humility.
You wove that so well with Hearthmother Journey because I've seen, and not necessarily do you specifically market Hearthmother Journey as a birth keeper's course, because it's very broad. It's for many levels. But I've seen other specific birth keeper courses where they were missing these major footstone paths, and they were getting this half education, but yet still having this quote unquote blessing of, okay, go out, do the thing, enough. And I even had that from past educations that I've had where it was like, okay, enough, now go out. And I got out there and I didn't know enough. And not that, there's X amount to know, but when you feel like you're floundering and you went to people that you trusted, hoping I'll get this traditional wisdom from you, and you got just the basic blueprints without any like detailed instructions or step by step, but like anything to really walk you through it. I was really missing this mentorship. And I did apprenticeship for 8 years. You might think she had a lot of mentorship. I didn't. They were very easy, straightforward, normal births for 8 years, surprisingly. Like we hardly ever saw anything that was a different kind of pattern. Hence why I went searching for different wisdom, for more broad wisdom. because I knew normal. I knew normal real well. But ask me what labs were needed to get a better picture at preeclampsia. I couldn't tell you. I had it in a Google Doc. I had it written down in my notes. But in my person, I didn't know it. Ask me like to in-depth describe to you what the story of GBS. I couldn't. I could give you a spiel that I learned from my preceptor that we gave everyone, and then we called that good, and then she had to make a very poorly informed decision. Okay, but it was like I was missing very, very huge foundational points. And then when I took Hearthmother Journey, the way you broke things down, the way you and Brooke broke it down, the steps of the Hearthmother, and how it was full body. It was nutrition. It was counseling. And oh, my favorite part, which I need like a series of devotionals from you, Lauren, which is a huge ask, but how you discipled us with the, I don't even remember what you called it, but the biblical curriculum piece of Hearthmother Journey.
For servants.
That was my favorite.
Scripture reading plan.
Yes,
that was a labor of love.
That was my favorite part. Because a lot of the other things I knew, right? I came into it knowing a lot of things. And then you added a lot of things. Like I had never heard of Splankna before. And just for one example, there were several things I hadn't heard of. But it was still a deeper, it was just deeper still. And then, but you did a good job of, here's how we can look at all the pieces, all the flower petals, take into consideration the roots, take into consideration, there's some nibbles out of those leaves. What could that be? How can we heal and remedy that? How can we support the healing? And that's just widely missing in so many different courses, trains of thought. Y'all did that.
Such a encouraging to know what we've put out has been, that was my heart. That was my heart to be able to make sure that women could be first discipled and encouraged to, one, relinquish into the mystery, but then also come competent, like come in and know the design so that they could do nothing, like we're not out here being hands off because because we don't know what to do. It's we're hands off because we know that if we put our hands on, we're messing with the design, and it should be warranted. If we should be needing to put it back to a path of normal, but because otherwise we're the ones pushing it off because we didn't understand.
Hey, it's Brooke here, and I just have to interrupt this amazing episode with Alisha and Lauren to let you, our listeners, know that the Hearthmother Journey program that Alisha has just been talking about is about to open up for another cohort this fall. So if you're listening to this in the month of July or August, it's not too late. We actually have an open house coming up, live event on August 18, and you are invited to it. So if what Alisha shared is resonating with you and you want to know more about that and see behind the scenes and hear me and Lauren talk about our heart behind it and how we created it and why, and show you all the things and take your questions and answers in real time, you are invited. So you want to grab that invitation in the show notes below, or go to rootedineden.org/Hearthmother-Journey. And when you're on there, you will see the invitation to the open house there as well. Can't wait to see you there. Now back to the conversation.
We were trying to do, like the plant was growing healthy. You did not have to pick off all the pine needles. It was fine, but you wanted to check that it was growing. So you pulled its leaves off. Like that doesn't help,
Right.
That's
right. It's a no more to do less.
Yes. And you have to, I think Carla, there's a great quote, and I wish I could find it. I know it's in Carla Hartley's apprenticeship guide. It's like Helping Hands or something along those lines. And there's a great quote that this is my paraphrase because I went to find it earlier and I couldn't, but she's essentially talking about how she started going to births as a midwife. Like she had done her training and she had been really thorough in her learning and really understanding the physiology and really getting to know how do things work, so that she didn't just, this is what we do, this is what we always do, so I'm going to do it. She asked why. She learned and she studied to really show herself approved, right? Like what the word tells us to do.
Yeah.
There was this deep understanding of how things work. And because of that, she had more confidence. So when she went into that birth, she was saying, like, I showed up and I was confident for things to be a little bit off the pattern than what I was, because I knew what was happening. I understood the pattern more deeply and more widely, that I could see the full tapestry, that she was able to just, I can be in this and I can leave my hands alone. And she was noticing that other midwives, her fellow peers, were coming out of similar trainings that she had done, but because they hadn't understood the pattern deeply, because they hadn't asked the why questions and really got to understand the design, they were not as confident. And they would come in and be like, that's not exactly what it was. So the little veer that is still normal was like, they were like, I don't know what to do. You know, they would lose their confidence. And I think knowing the design and knowing the blueprint and really being able to, it gives us the ability to have critical thought and be able to assess, okay, wait, this is not normal, but maybe it is, because that baby is shifting and they're trying to go to this place. So it makes sense that she's got to, you know, we can put her in this position or whatever it is. It gives us that confidence to know the next right step.
Not being afraid to ask questions too. In the church that I grew up, I was, I wouldn't say that it was shunned to not ask questions. It was welcomed, and sometimes it would be welcomed with more questions, and sometimes it wouldn't be as welcomed, or it would be, and I won't say my church specifically, but the greater circle that it was kind of was, well, don't ask questions, don't question God. And I don't think that was appropriate. It's good to ask questions, and asking questions about physiology is different than asking questions that you shouldn't be asking about God. We don't need to question why this, who that. There's a certain trust level, and we want to hold this certain trust level. But asking questions in labor, asking questions about, why does the body want to expand the blood volume? What good does that bring us postpartum? Why? How can we see that in pregnancy? How can we see what signs in the first trimester? What signs in the second and the last trimester show us a good volume expansion? Oh, I'm seeing, XYZ. You are free to ask, why am I seeing this? What is this telling me? What can I glean from this? And sometimes it's, what is the invitation from our body to know, is this an invitation or a request for a specific nutrient? Is this a request for certain body work? There's so much that we can ask for. There are so many, like we're saying, I like this plant metaphor that we're on. We can look at the roots, we can look at the leaves, we can look at the petals, and it's not a bad thing to provide fertilizer. What is fertilizer? We know fertilizer to be growth producing. We know it to bring nutrients, to bring health, bring vitality. That's great. It's simply this replacement of what's missing, maybe what's missing in the soil. Maybe it's really depleted soil, and we want to boost that soil to bring a healthier plant, to bring more robust fruit, whatever we're doing. Fertilizer is not bad.
Yeah.
Sunshine. You're not gonna want to grow a plant totally covered by shade. You're not gonna not give it water. There are these really clear things that bring health and vitality to this fruiting body, a plant or a growing pregnant woman. And so it's okay to ask questions, and it's okay to try and lean into those invitations that are being given. And part of that is knowing the foundations of this blueprint. What is it asking for? Well, it's asking for protein. It's asking for minerals. It's asking for clean water, for, semi-clean air. Not always can you help where you live, but are you burning really toxic candles? Are you someone that cleans with tons of really synthetic and harsh chemicals in your home every day without airing out? How are you taking care of your body? Being a good steward, what you're feeding it, what you're replenishing it with,
Yes. So good. So true. Starting out on this conversation, I wasn't quite sure where exactly we would go. We had some general ideas, but I just love that it was the noticing of patterns that really rose up to the top. And I hope that this has been a, encouraging and in message, something to just invite you into understanding your body deeper, understanding the birth process for those who are serving. I'm so thankful for being able to be here with you today and dive into being a pattern noticer. But I would love for our audience to know a little bit more about where they can find you, what you're doing out here in the world, and how they can come over and listen to your wisdom further on your podcast, or maybe even get a chance to work with you directly. So please let us know where you are. And then if you wouldn't mind praying us out.
Okay. To end it out, I will let you know where to find me. I am Birth Cultivated everywhere. My podcast, website, Instagram, Birth Cultivated. And I have a ongoing mentorship. Join anytime. And that's for mothers, birth workers of any kind. And then online prenatal, postpartum birth education, subscription forms for you to join if you want to connect more with me and get to know my heart and my education better. But what a fun conversation, and I'll close us in prayer. Lord, I thank you for our conversation today. I thank you for the sweet relationship that I've had the opportunity to build with Lauren and Brooke, and the goodness that they're putting out, that you're giving them and you're giving to them to put out, Lord. It is a narrow and rocky path, Lord, but we are thankful for your guiding light and your guiding hand through that. And I pray that you just continue to preserve them as they're putting out some really good stuff on that rocky path, Lord. Thank you for bringing them into our lives and for just putting on their hearts what you've put on their hearts, because it is so, so needed. Thank you for what they're doing for this platform and for their families, to allow them to be giving as they are and teaching and mentoring as they are, Lord. We love you in your name. Amen.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Holy Wild Birth. We hope that you were genuinely encouraged, inspired, and challenged by what you heard today. If you're loving what you hear, please make sure that you share it. Leave reviews. That helps other mamas find this content as well. And don't forget to read the show notes, okay? Because that's where you can find our email address if you want to reach out to us and start a conversation. It's also where you'll find free offerings as well as invitations to work with me and or Lauren. We can't wait to get to know you. See you next week.